Another one?
Arthur! What's happening?
Giovanni's in the workshop! Go take him out!
Hello everybody, MegaZard here. I'm back at it again to give y'all another exciting Fire Force episode review, and this time we're going to be reviewing episode 17, Black and White and Gray. And if you hadn't already watched my last week's episode review over episode 16, you can go ahead and click that card in the corner and check that video out, and then come back and check this one though. But overall, this episode as a whole, oh gosh, now this one, it started to give me some goosebumps a little bit, because with that first part of the episode, man, that had all your action-packed, jam-packed, everything else that was up in it. And man, that animation during some of those fight scenes though, man, that stuff was just super fluid. And overall, it was really exciting to see all of that mess go down. And then we actually got to see Sho make his first debut within the anime in terms of him making like an interaction with Shinra. So that was really cool and interesting to see in itself. And then, you know, in the back part of the episode, then you kind of get into the sincere kind of slow, but also kind of a little bit emotional kind of side of things. So yeah, this is definitely an episode of a tale of two halves, so to say, with this episode. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight up into this Fire Force review.
With this secured, all that's left is to dispose of you.
That's why I'm called Smash the Doctor's Creepy Nosing Man. Get away from my company's new engineer.
So starting off at the very beginning of the episode, we basically get to see a little bit of a sort of kind of like a recap that was from the previous episode though. But the first bit of new content that we get is whenever Shinra is tied down and he's basically kind of left in that forest, essentially the same place where, you know, he got attacked by Dr. Giovanni. And we thought, or at least I personally thought, that he probably would have had some White Clad members to come over there, pick him up, and, you know, ship him off to wherever he needed to be at. But apparently they just, you know, kept him tied down to a bunch of stuff. And then Hibana just comes out of nowhere and just starts looking down at him and is like, oh, you got caught. Oh, I can have fun with you now. No, not like that though. But although she was definitely sort of kind of thinking about it though. But essentially, she managed to actually show up and find Shinra thanks to her having like a wire tapped on Iris. So she was able to kind of hear, you know, kind of what was going on with this whole scenario while they're over here trying to recruit Volkan. Knew that some things were going down. It's like, you know what, let me just pop my head up in here and see what's going on. And thank goodness she did. And it was thanks to her that she was basically able to save Shinra. And Shinra kind of quickly spilled the beans off to her real quick and said, hey, look, you know, Company 3, they're associated with the White Clad. We can't trust any of them. They got my friends held captive back at Volkan's workshop. I gotta go. Bye. And he basically zoomed off at that moment and kind of just left Captain Hibana there. But she was going to eventually, you know, make her way back to the scene where all the crap is going down. And during this short little time, Shinra is basically able to essentially make it all the way back to the workshop. And man, he's just flying in there, soaring around, you know, sending out his fiery kicks and making quick work of the people that were, you know, standing outside that was supposed to prevent Arthur as well as anybody else from, you know, entering the workshop and disturbing Dr. Giovanni. And it was during this short little time period where Dr. Giovanni, he was beating up on one of Volkan's machines. And then he finds this, what looks to be like a little USB though, but Dr. Giovanni identifies it and said, you know what, that's the key to Amaterasu. This is the thing we've been looking for all this time. And yet it was hidden in, you know, all of this junk that Giovanni basically said. And the second that he basically had his hands on it, Shinra knocks on the door and says, hello, and busts into the scene and knees Dr. Giovanni in the face. And finally, we get to see Shinra there, back in action, trying to protect everybody else after all this crap has managed to go down. And then, while all of this is happening within the workshop, Meanwhile, Hibana is basically outside, and now she's able to assist, or rather taking complete control of the battle that Arthur was fighting with the White Clad members outside the workshop. So she basically used her powers to throw off the air densities, so that one White Clad member that was basically making duplicates of himself, it basically messed up his mojo where he wasn't able to create the duplicate, so then it was just the two of them that was standing out there that they had to fight. However, whenever Captain Hibana was basically taking control, she was taking complete control, because with her power, as we saw whenever Arthur was fighting Hibana back in that, Company 5 arc, Hibana, whenever she uses her powers, she can basically almost immobilize people thanks to the air densities and whatnot. And it even started to take a toll on Arthur, so Arthur wasn't even able to stand up or fight on his own. And she was like, you know what, I'll basically eliminate anybody, friend or foe alike, as long as it's not Shinra though. But basically, she was going to take down the enemy along with Arthur with him. Not to extreme severity, but just enough to where it was just going to mobilize the other two, where those threats are taken care of. Now, meanwhile, back inside the workshop, Lisa, we know that she's basically associated with the White Clad members now, and Lisa started to get in the action as well. So she started to use her pyrokinetic powers, and Lisa's flames are actually magnetically charged, and they sense that the magnetic fields around living things and latches onto them. So that's what her power basically does. So Volkan basically, hearing this, he tells Iris to go ahead and start hitting all these random buttons that are up against the wall, and it starts to make all of these different machines drop, from the ceiling down. And at first I was kind of thinking about this, I was like, how in the world was this gonna do anything? And at first I was thinking, hey, each one of those individual machines would kind of show the value and worth of, what they mean to Volkan. So I thought he was gonna play on Lisa's emotional side to kind of get her to come to her senses though. But no, that wasn't entirely it. And it was basically, each one of those machines had enough of a magnetic field to essentially throw off Lisa's powers. So it was kind of cool and interesting to see, Volkan can't naturally fight because he doesn't have any pyrokinetic powers though. But it was cool and interesting in itself to be able to see Volkan, basically use his brains in order to still, even though he can't fight, be able to outsmart and outthink and, basically immobilize somebody from basically using one of their pyrokinetic powers. So that was really cool in itself. And then after this, Shinra was basically free from Lisa's grasp, and then he immediately charged after Giovanni and busted him up again and knocked him outside. Now this is where things really get interesting, because this is where we finally get to see Sho in action and really sort of kind of make his debut, in terms of him meeting and interacting with Shinra. And at first, Shinra looked at him and was like, you know what, there's my brother. Hey man, it's so nice to see you. Hey, you look good. You be a popular hit in school. I can finally make that promise with mom and, finally be able to take care of you and protect you. But, Sho had some different plans on his agenda. And in a blink of an eye, that dude was literally standing right next to Shinra. And Shinra was like, what the heck? I didn't even see this dude move. How in the world did he close the gap in between us so fast? And he didn't even hesitate though, but then he started thinking about some things, what the evangelist basically told him and said, hey, you're gonna recognize Shinra on sight whenever you first encounter him. And he did, and he recognized that he knew that was basically his brother, but at the same time he felt disgust. He didn't feel that personal bond that Shinra did to Sho. Sho basically almost casted all of that off. And it makes me think, was Sho in some way kind of brainwashed? Because the way how Shinra portrays Sho, he didn't seem like the kind of person that would just, flip his switch off and say, you know what, I'm going to cast away all family aside or nothing like that. So something does seem a little bit fishy about Sho. And I don't know if he completely willingly, accepted the terms and conditions to work with the White Clad, or is he being persuaded, or is he getting brainwashed? Or, did the White Clad basically tell him something and basically kind of threaten him to sort of kind of work underneath him because of his connection with Shinra and him having the Adola burst and everything else like that though. But it was really interesting to see all that go down. And then essentially you had Arthur charging in with his sword, and then Sho made quick work of him, and it was thanks to Arthur's quick reaction time that he dodged most of the lethal blow that Sho was about to give him though. But he still didn't manage to walk away unscathed, because he did get quite a bit of a cut right there in the middle of his chest like that. But it was basically enough to basically, knock Arthur down for the count. And then, Shinra's about to go over there and help him though, but then Sho does another quick little gut check essentially, and essentially, you know, has Shinra on the ground, and they was like, you know what, because you have the Adola burst within you, you're basically gonna have to come with us.
As a wielder of the Adola burst, you need to come with us now.
Shinra!
Quite impressive. He actually reacted.
Arthur! How is he able to move like that?
And you know, things weren't looking good for Shinra and his crew, and then all of a sudden you see this little fizzy little black stuff kind of falling down from the sky, and then boom, you start to see explosions kind of going around the workshop, and then you just see this truck just zooming by, and then you see Volkan in the back say, hey, come on, Shinra. And then Shinra, having Arthur in his arm, you know, he basically jumped on the truck and was basically trying to get away. And who is driving this truck? It was none other than the scientist Victor Lick. So I have absolutely no idea where in the world did this dude come out of, but this dude was driving the getaway, man. Like, all right, I see you, man. But it is a little fishy how you showed up out of nowhere, though. But I'll talk about that here in a little bit, though. But anyway, they were trying to get away, and essentially there was one little moment where, you know, Volkan was trying to say, hey, Lisa, come on, you know, you don't basically deserve to be here. You're supposed to be with us, so come on, let's go. And there was a quick little moment where you saw within Lisa's eyes how, you know, sort of kind of innocent she was, and kind of reflecting back whenever Volkan first found Lisa in the junkyard, essentially. And it seemed like for a brief moment she almost came to the reality of how good she naturally was, but then at last second, you know, she lowered her hand and basically turned her head and said, you know what, I just can't. Like, I got myself too deep in this situation. I just can't. So I don't know exactly what kind of hold does the White Clad have on her in terms of her backstory and whatnot, because I think she has some sort of kind of twisted path, and she's not, so to say, like purely evil to the degree of like what we see with other people that are associated with the White Clad, but I think she's just like misguided and misinformed. Maybe it's just because of her bad background, and the matter of fact that, you know, whenever she was in desperate times, she was basically latching on to whatever she could first, and it was unfortunate that probably Volkan wasn't the first one to come to her knee, but rather it was probably some White Clad members that managed to get to her first. So she's basically kind of having this battle within her head between, you know, probably the side of good and evil, so to say. But essentially Lisa stays behind, and it was a little bit unfortunate. Now, however, as they were driving away, you know, Sho wasn't going to let this by, so he zipped in and still managed to get in front of the truck and was about to make, you know, quick work of everybody that was on that getaway truck. However, Joker, out of nowhere, shows up and manages to clash blades with Sho, and I was like, oh crap. I was like, now this dude popping out of nowhere. I'm like, where the heck are all these people popping out of in this episode? Like, we didn't have no explanation how Joker managed to show up on there. But if you go back and rewind a little bit in the episode where you saw that little black dust come down and then you saw all those explosions, yeah, we know we saw that before way back in episode 3, and we basically know that's basically made out of some kind of explosive material made by the scientists, so we got to talk about that here in a moment though. But anyway, Joker shows up on the scene and he's able to actually hold his own against Sho, which is kind of shocking in itself. And you know, they were going tick for tack and moving really fast.
Sorry, Squirt, but I can't let you have him yet.
The heroes arrived.
You know, Joker wasn't able to basically lay any damage to him, and vice versa the other way around though, but it seemed like these people were almost sort of kind of evenly matched. And it was weird, you know, after Joker was able to hold him off for just long enough to where, you know, the rest of the crew could escape, he managed to disappear, and Sho was thinking to himself, he's like, man, this dude doesn't even have an Adola link, yet he was able to kind of hold his own against me. And then you had Joker kind of reflecting with himself, you know, on a tree off in some distant area, and he was like, man, that dude's a monster, like, man. And this is the thing, you know, Joker said to Sho that, hey, I wasn't gonna let either the Fire Force or you have your way. So it kind of seems like Joker's kind of working this weird angle where he knows that obviously the White Clad is just purely bad. He wants to basically stop them, But at the same time, he doesn't, fully trust the Fire Force, which that could be on that, the dark side of the Fire Force with, companies such as, Company 3 now that's been associated itself with the White Clad, or, for example, Company 5 that was trying to work their own angles before, Hibana kind of came to her senses. So he knows there's like corruption within the Fire Force, so he's trying to eliminate that while also eliminating, the pure evil side with the White Clad. So we're starting to kind of get a little bit of a grasp of the angle that Joker is kind of relating to. And essentially that's where that part of the episode ends, and that's basically the high point action of the whole entire episode. Then we transition to the slower part of the episode and a little bit more so on the emotional side, as we're essentially having Shinra and Volkan kind of sitting down at what seems to be like a nearby hospital, and they're just basically reflecting over the past events of literally everything that just basically happened. And Shinra was just having the heart-to-heart with the man and said, you know what, I feel bad for, not protecting you and your family. And, we were supposed to come there, essentially to persuade you and say, hey, you know what? I know you don't really like, we know you definitely don't like Hajime Industry, as well as, many of the Fire Force companies, though. But we were still trying to find a way to be able to convince you that, hey, Company 8 might be the place for you to work at. And we really need your help in order to, kind of stop all the suffering with all of the Inferno breakouts and everything. And Volkan said, you know what, no, it is not on you, it's not on your head that, all of this bad mess has gone down. It was y'all that basically warned me to tell me that, hey, a big threat was coming, and I did not trust y'all, and I did not heed your warning. So all of this responsibility relies on me, and the fact that, you is over there busted up in the hospital after getting shot by Dr. Giovanni. And the matter of fact that Lisa, who he thought was a really kind person, just switched sides at last moment and just, went to the White Clad side of things. And it was kind of like a high emotional state for him just to be able to kind of swallow up all that stuff. But he basically said, you know what, hey, you can stay at Company 8 for as long as you can. You can take refuge there for as long as you want. And we're not going to try to force you to join Company 8, but just let you know the offer's still on the table. You saw this mess that's going down. We're trying to prevent stuff like this from happening to anybody else. And while this was going down, there was a talk between Hibana and the scientists. And this is where things get a little interesting, because this is what I was talking about that whole scene of how, how in the world did that scientist show up there at last moment? And it just happened to be super convenient for him to show up. And Hibana was starting to kind of catch on that whiff, as I was saying, earlier within this review. And he basically said, you know what, it was taking them quite a bit of time for them to kind of return back home. So I basically kind of went out there myself. And since we know that the Joker and the scientists were in cahoots with each other within episode 3, I'm pretty sure it was Joker that somehow managed to tip off the scientist to where he basically needed to come in over here and say, hey, Joker's over here like, hey, you know what, you need to come over here and pick up your boys, because things are going down south, man. And I'm pretty sure that's pretty much how that kind of went down, though. But it's interesting to kind of see how all this played out, and we still gonna have to keep an eye on this scientist, because I still don't 100% trust him, same way how Hibana was kind of thinking about him in this episode. And that's pretty much all of the main meat and potatoes of this episode with the deep stuff. And then you basically get to see, Volkan, we're back at Company 8 after Captain Obi picked up everybody from the hospital. And they were basically, sitting around the table, and it was good to see all of Company 8, united once together again. And they're just kind of eating around the table, and you always see Shinra as well as Arthur butting heads with each other, and they're joking around with Tamaki's lucky lure and everything else. And this was like a first case showing for Volkan, basically showing off that, hey, Company 8 is definitely not like any of the other Fire Force companies that are out there. And essentially, Volkan was kind of coming to terms and was about to make his final decision, and he requested for him to kind of go back to the workshop, just to basically say some final, parting words with his family, where he basically sort of kind of had their graves kind of set up at. And he knew that basically his family never trusted the kind of work underneath Hajime Industries as well as, the Fire Force. But he said he's going to have to basically break that rule and make an exception, because, hey, this Company 8 is unlike anything else I've ever seen. And with this, Volkan is now officially a member of the Company 8, and now he's basically their head engineer. So now Company 8 is really rolling out, because now they got a scientist who is a little bit sketchy, and now we got a really good engineer, one of the best engineers that are out there that could never get recruited by Hajime Industries themselves or any of the other Fire Force companies. So slowly we're starting to build this roster for Company 8, because, you know, originally you had the original crew, and then we added Tamaki from Company 1, and we added the scientist, and we added now the engineer, and then, you know, Captain Hibana's kind of in and out. She's like a half Company 8 member at this moment in time, because she's always somewhere around in their company somewhere, though, and it's kind of funny to see that, though. But overall, it's just nice to kind of see this family of Company 8 slowly growing more and more as we've gone through all of these episodes, though. But that's pretty much it for this episode, though. So if you really like this review, go ahead and hit that like button, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to keep up to date on all things Fire Force I'm reviewing this series. So down in the comment section below, let me know what your overall thoughts were in this episode, and what do you think about all of these events, how Sho managed to show up for the first time to meet Shinra, and how that mess kind of go down, and what do you think about that scientist and how super sketchy this man is, and how do y'all feel and relate in terms of Volkan joining the crew now, and how do y'all feel about seeing all of that crap go down at his workshop within like the past few episodes and all that mess? Just let me know down in the comment section what you thought about this episode as a whole, though. So make sure to tune in next week for my Fire Force episode 18 review, The Secrets of Pyrokinesis. So until whatever video I make next, see y'all.
I thought I could do it all on my own. But then I met Lisa, and you. And now this guy from the Fire Force who says he wants to help. I'm sorry, Granddad and Pop. Gave my word, but I'm breaking it.